The scorching sun of General Santos City bathed the dusty streets as Manny Pacquiao observed the familiar landscape through the car window. Years had passed since the legendary Filipino boxer and politician had visited his old elementary school, a place where his dreams began to take shape, even when hunger and poverty were his daily companions. His hands, now marked by countless fights and victories, rested on his knees as he took a deep breath, preparing himself for what would be a day of nostalgia and reconnection with his humble origins. The small municipal school hadn't changed much. In its basic structure, concrete walls weathered by time, corrugated metal roof, and simple windows that let in the warm Philippine breeze. Manny felt a tightness in his chest as he contemplated the courtyard, where he used to play with friends during breaks, often barefoot because he couldn't afford proper shoes. Those memories, though painful, had been fundamental in shaping his determination to change not only his own life, but also the lives of other Filipinos still struggling against poverty. His visit hadn't been announced beforehand, a deliberate decision to maintain the authenticity of the moment and avoid any special preparations that might mask the daily reality of the institution. Manny wanted to see the school exactly as it normally functioned, with its real difficulties and challenges. Accompanied only by his personal assistant, Ernesto Villanueva, and the school principal, Professor Ronaldo Macaraeg, who had been informed just hours earlier, the world champion now walked through the narrow corridors where he once ran as a child. The noise of children studying in cramped classrooms brought a nostalgic smile to Manny's face. The animated voices reciting lessons, the creaking of wooden chairs against the concrete floor, and the occasional muffled laughter were sounds that transported the boxer back in time. Professor Macaraeg explained in a low voice the improvements they had managed to implement in recent years, but also the many needs that persisted: outdated books, precarious infrastructure, and the reality that many students still came to school without the basics, such as complete uniforms or adequate school supplies. It was during this walk through the corridors that Manny first spotted him, a thin, dark-skinned boy sitting in the back row of a third-grade classroom. Unlike the other children who wore simple rubber sandals, the boy was completely barefoot, his small feet dangling in the air, not reaching the floor. Even from a distance, Manny noticed the calluses and marks on those feet, unmistakable signs of long walks without protection. The boy was focused, leaning over his notebook with an expression of determination that Manny immediately recognized. It was the look of someone fighting with all their strength against overwhelming circumstances. That look penetrated deep into Manny's memory like a reflection of his own past. The boy, whom he would later discover was named Bayani Manahan, was approximately 9 years old, with short, tousled black hair and a posture that, despite evident poverty, displayed a natural dignity. During the official introduction to the class, when the teacher announced the famous visitor's presence, Manny observed that while the other children exploded with excitement and admiration, Bayani remained reserved, his dark eyes studying the boxer with cautious curiosity, as if assessing not the celebrity, but the man behind the fame. The visit continued with Manny sharing some words of encouragement with the children, speaking about the importance of education and perseverance, values he himself had needed to embrace to overcome his childhood of extreme poverty. As he spoke, his eyes kept returning to Bayani, who listened attentively to every word without the euphoria of his classmates, but with an intensity that suggested he was absorbing each syllable as precious lessons for his own journey. The contrast between the brand-name sneakers Manny wore and the boy's bare feet didn't go unnoticed by the champion, creating a persistent discomfort in his heart. After the brief talk, as the children returned to their normal activities, Manny discreetly asked Professor Macaraeg about Bayani's situation. The story he heard was painfully familiar. The boy came from a family of fishermen from Mindanao Island who had moved to General Santos City in search of better opportunities after losing everything in a typhoon. His father worked as a stevedore. At the port, his mother sold homemade snacks on the streets, and together they could barely put food on the table for Bayani and his 3 younger siblings. Shoes, the professor explained with a sigh, were a luxury the family simply couldn't afford. What impressed Manny most, however, was learning that Bayani walked almost 5 kilometers every day to get to school, leaving home before dawn to never be late. Even more remarkable was that the boy maintained some of the best grades in the class, especially in mathematics, demonstrating a natural ability with numbers that impressed his teachers. "He has potential for a scholarship in the future," commented Professor Macareag, "if he can overcome the obstacles that poverty places in his path." As the official visit continued to other parts of the school, Manny felt divided. His body followed the planned itinerary, but his mind remained in that classroom with the barefoot boy. The similarities to his own childhood were disturbing, as if he were looking at a version of himself from decades ago. How many times had he himself sat in a similar classroom, with his stomach rumbling from hunger, barefoot, but his mind determined to find a way out of poverty? The visit to the school, which had begun as a simple return to his roots, now gained a deeper and more personal meaning that Manny couldn't ignore. That night, staying at his mother's house in General Santos City, Manny couldn't get the image of Bayani out of his mind. Sitting on the simple porch, observing the stars that dotted the Philippine sky, he vividly recalled the days when he sold cigarettes on the streets to help his family, when each peso earned meant the difference between eating or going to bed hungry. The memories, normally kept in a secure compartment of his mind, now overflowed like water from a too-full glass, bringing back physical sensations his body had never forgotten. The burning in his feet after days of walking without shoes on hot asphalt, the shame of entering public places barefoot, the pitying looks some people cast. Dionysia Pacquiao, his mother, observed her son in silence, knowing that thoughtful expression that took over his face. After years of being the pillar of strength for her children during the hardest times, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to read Manny's emotions. With a cup of local herbal tea in her hands, she sat beside her son who, despite having achieved wealth and world fame, still carried the invisible scars of poverty. When he finally shared the encounter with Bayani, Dionysia simply nodded, knowing that the meeting had touched something deep in her son's heart. "Our feet tell our stories," she said in Tagalog, with the simple wisdom that had always guided the family through difficult times. Manny reflected on these words as he mentally reviewed his own journey, from barefoot in the streets of General Santos to the rings of Las Vegas, from torn sneakers to custom-made Italian shoes, from obscurity to global spotlight. Each step of that walk had been marked by sacrifice, determination, and eventually by giving back to his community. Success for Manny had never been just about personal accumulation, but about creating bridges for others to follow similar paths. The silence of the tropical night was interrupted by the distant call of a street vendor, a familiar sound that belonged to a world Manny had left behind, but that remained so real for millions of Filipinos. That call now seemed like a reminder that despite all his achievements, there was still much work to be done. Poverty statistics in the Philippines remained alarming, and behind each number was a child like Bayani, fighting against overwhelming odds with nothing but their own determination as a weapon. Before retiring to sleep, Manny made a decision. He would return to the school the next day, not as the champion boxer or the influential politician, but as someone who understood exactly what it meant to be in that barefoot boy's shoes. It wouldn't just be an act of charity, but a recognition of the responsibility he felt to help create real opportunities for children like Bayani. With this resolution in mind, Manny finally found enough peace to fall asleep as the night sounds of his hometown cradled his dreams with memories of a past that, by a strange twist of fate, now seemed as present as ever. The next morning, even before the first rays of sun tinged the Philippine horizon, Manny was already awake, his mind working out the details of what he intended to do. With the discretion he had learned to value over his years in the spotlight, he instructed Ernesto to make some calls and arrange certain items without fanfare. He didn't want publicity for what he was planning, just the opportunity to make a real and meaningful difference in the life of Bayani and his family, away from the cameras and public praise that normally accompanied his philanthropic actions. The central market of General Santos was just beginning to awaken when Manny and Ernesto arrived, blending in with the merchants, setting up their stalls. and the first buyers seeking the freshest products. Wearing a simple cap and sunglasses, the boxer went almost unnoticed as he personally selected various items: quality school supplies, durable clothes in different sizes, and, most importantly, several pairs of sturdy footwear. For each item chosen, Manny remembered his own childhood, how something as simple as a new notebook or a shirt without patches could mean a world of difference for a child in poverty. After the market, the next stop was a small sporting goods store nearby. He recalled how Bayani had commented to the professor, who in turn shared with Manny about his admiration for boxing and how he watched the fights whenever possible on the small community television in the neighborhood. Inspired by this information, Manny acquired basic equipment: gloves, a mouthguard, wraps, and a light punching bag. His intention wasn't to mold the boy in his image, but to respond to an interest that Bayani already naturally demonstrated, offering tools that could teach discipline, perseverance, and self-confidence, values that transcended the ring and had been fundamental in his own development. The last and most significant item on his list required a visit to a local government office where, with the help of some political contacts, Manny managed to initiate a process that would guarantee a small scholarship for Bayani, sufficient to cover his basic school needs until the end of elementary school. It wasn't an exorbitant amount or a miraculous solution to all the family's problems, but it represented something Manny valued more than any sum of money: opportunity. The scholarship would be renewable based on academic performance, encouraging the boy to continue dedicating himself to his studies. As the sun reached its highest point in the sky, Manny finalized the preparations for his return to the school. Everything had been arranged with the utmost discretion, with Professor Makareg being the only one informed about the unofficial visit that would happen after regular school hours. Sitting in the passenger seat of the car, observing the city that saw him grow up pass by the window, Manny reflected on the transformative power of small gestures. He had learned throughout his journey that, although he couldn't change the situation of all children in the Philippines, he could make a significant difference in the lives of some of them, one at a time. And that day, it would be Bayani Manahan's turn to experience how an act of kindness could illuminate even the darkest and most difficult paths. The sun was beginning its descent on the horizon of General Santos when Manny returned to the school, now silent after the end of classes. Only a few children remained in the courtyard, participating in extracurricular activities or waiting for family members to pick them up. Professor Makarayag waited as arranged, and with a discreet nod, indicated a small annex near the library. Where Bayani was, the boy had been invited to stay after school under the pretext of helping organize some newly donated books, with no idea of the real reason or who was waiting for him. His face reflected genuine surprise when he saw Manny Pacquiao enter the room alone, carrying several bags. Bayani stood up immediately as a sign of respect, his bare feet moving silently across the cold floor. The initial stiffness in his posture gradually gave way to cautious curiosity as Manny approached with a warm smile. In Tagalog, the boxer greeted the boy and sat in a nearby chair, deliberately placing himself at the same level as Bayani. With simple and sincere words, Manny shared how he had noticed the boy the day before and how that sight had awakened memories of his own childhood. Without drama or pity, he spoke about the days when he also attended school barefoot, when hunger was a constant companion and the future seemed an endless road of difficulties. As Manny spoke, a silent connection began to form between the man who had conquered the world and the boy who fought daily against poverty. Bayani's eyes, initially lowered from shyness, now met Manny's with increasing confidence, as if recognizing in him not just the celebrated champion, but someone who truly understood his reality. When Manny asked about school, about his dreams and difficulties, the answers came first in short, hesitant phrases, then in increasingly fluid words, revealing a sharp intelligence and determination that impressed the boxer. Bayani spoke about his love for mathematics and sciences, about how he dreamed of becoming an engineer to build houses that would resist typhoons like the one that had destroyed his family's former home. He told about the exhausting routine, waking up before dawn to help his mother, Amihan, prepare snacks to sell, walking to school regardless of the weather, and still finding energy to study at night under the faint light of a single lamp the family could keep on. When he mentioned that his father, Lakis, frequently suffered from back pain due to heavy work at the port, but never missed a day to ensure the family's livelihood, Manny recognized the same unbreakable spirit his own mother had shown during the toughest years. With the setting sun casting golden shadows through the windows of the small annex, Manny finally began to reveal the contents of the bags he had brought. For each item he presented, notebooks, pencils, clothes, shoes, he shared a related personal story, transforming what could have been a moment of charity into a meaningful exchange between two people who, despite the difference in age and current circumstances, shared a similar past. When he got to the boxing equipment, Bayani's eyes widened with surprise and admiration. Manny smiled at the reaction and explained that he had learned, through Professor Pacquiao, of the boy's interest in the sport. He wasn't suggesting a specific path, he emphasized, but responding to a passion the boy already naturally nurtured, offering tools that had taught him valuable lessons about discipline and perseverance that applied to any area of life. The most touching moment came when Manny presented the pair of sneakers he had specially chosen for Bayani. They weren't luxurious or flashy footwear, but durable, comfortable, and practical sneakers, designed to endure long walks and the daily wear they would be subjected to. With gentleness, he asked permission to help the boy put them on, kneeling before him in a gesture that symbolized much more than simple assistance. As he adjusted the laces, Manny noticed the various abrasions and calluses on Bayani's small feet, silent marks of the difficulties he faced daily, and felt an intense emotion tighten his throat. Bayani remained silent, watching with an almost incredulous expression as his feet, accustomed to the roughness of the ground, felt for the first time the comfort of proper footwear. When he finally stood up and took some experimental steps, a shy but genuine smile lit up his face. "They feel like clouds," he murmured in Tagalog, a comparison that made Manny smile in understanding. The boxer vividly remembered the sensation of his first pair of real shoes, how they seemed to transform not only the way he walked, but also how he felt about himself and his place in the world. Before the emotion of the moment could turn into embarrassment for the boy, Manny subtly shifted the focus of the conversation to the scholarship he had arranged. He carefully explained the terms. It wasn't charity, but an investment in the determination and potential he saw in Bayani. The scholarship would cover his basic school needs, complete uniform, and a small stipend for food, renewable annually based on his academic performance. He emphasized that he didn't expect perfection, just the genuine commitment that Bayani already naturally demonstrated with his studies. As he explained the practical details, Manny carefully observed the boy's reactions, concerned with preserving his dignity and self-esteem. It was with relief that he noticed how Bayani absorbed each piece of information with surprising maturity for his age, asking insightful questions about the responsibilities that accompanied such an opportunity. There wasn't in his eyes the gleam of greed or the passivity of dependence, just the seriousness of someone who recognizes the real value of the chance they're receiving and the commitment it represents. The afternoon was advancing quickly, and Manny knew he needed to conclude the meeting. Professor Pacquiao had discreetly arranged for a school employee to take Bayani and the gifts home safely, avoiding having the boy carry everything alone on his long walk. Before saying goodbye, Manny asked if he could take a single photo with Bayani, not for publicity or social media, but as a personal reminder of an encounter that he felt had been meaningful for both. With the boy's consent, Professor Pacquiao took the simple photograph, not the famous boxer with a fan, but two Filipinos of different generations, united by shared experiences and the mutual recognition of a fight that transcended the ring. In the weeks that followed, Manny returned to his busy life of political commitments and business, but his thoughts frequently returned to General Santos and to the barefoot boy whose path he had crossed. Through discreet updates from Professor Pacquiao, he learned that Bayani continued to excel academically, and that his family, initially reluctant to accept help out of pride, had gradually understood that the opportunity offered wasn't a handout, but a genuine recognition of their son's potential. Bayani's mother had even sent through the professor a small box of kakanin, traditional Filipino sweets she sold, as a simple gesture of gratitude. The impact of the encounter, however, extended beyond Bayani's life. Inspired by the experience, Manny began to review and restructure his philanthropic initiatives, moving away from grand charity events that generated publicity but often offered temporary solutions in favor of more direct and sustainable interventions. He worked with his team to develop a pilot program of scholarships, similar to the one offered to Bayani, focusing on children with proven academic potential but facing extreme financial difficulties, initially implemented in schools in general, Santos City, and later expanded to other needy regions of the Philippines. In his office in Manila, Manny kept the photograph with Bayani framed, not on public display, but in a discreet location where only he could see it daily. The image served as a constant reminder of the roots of his motivation and the real impact that small focused acts could have, contrasting with the grand gestures that often characterize the world of celebrity philanthropy. When questioned by political colleagues about his recent change in approach to social projects, Manny simply responded that he had rediscovered the transformative power of putting on one pair of shoes at a time. For Bayani and his family, the changes were gradual but significant. With the security of the scholarship and the relief from financial pressure related to education, his parents were able to redirect limited resources to improve other areas of their lives. Lekas, the father, was able to seek treatment for his chronic back pain, allowing him to work more efficiently. Amihan, the mother, with the help of a small microcredit loan, she was able to obtain more easily due to the family's newly acquired stability, expanded her homemade snack business, opening a small permanent stall near a local school instead of traveling the streets daily. Bayani himself flourished with the new opportunities. His feet, now protected by adequate footwear, no longer suffered from the constant injuries that often became infected and forced him to miss classes. The appropriate school supplies and less worry about basic needs allowed him to focus even more on his studies, achieving results that impressed even the most experienced teachers. The boxing equipment became a significant part of his after-school routine, not as a path to follow in Manny's footsteps, but as a way to build physical and mental strength. The sessions with the punching bag in the small yard of his house became a ritual that helped him release stress and cultivate discipline, exactly as Manny had suggested might happen. 18 months after the initial encounter, Manny returned to the elementary school in General Santos for an official visit related to a new educational program he was supporting through his political office. Although the main purpose was different, he secretly awaited the opportunity to see Bayani again and personally observe how the boy was progressing. The school had been notified in advance this time, and a small ceremony was organized in the central courtyard, with students and teachers gathered to receive the illustrious visitor. Among the orderly rows of uniformed children, Manny immediately located Bayani, now a few centimeters taller, and with a posture that displayed a quiet confidence that wasn't present the year before. The boy wore a complete and clean school uniform with well-preserved shoes, though different from the original pair Manny had given him that had probably become too small. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and a discreet but meaningful smile was exchanged between them, a silent acknowledgement of the shared journey that no one else in the assembly could fully understand. As Manny walked through the school corridors, several teachers and staff discreetly recognized him with respectful smiles and subtle nods. Although no one openly mentioned his previous unofficial visit, it was evident from the warm yet contained reception that his connection with the school was deeper than a mere ceremonial visit. A young teacher timidly approached to thank him for the anonymous donation of books the library had received, an initiative that Manny had silently funded after his first visit, but had never publicly claimed. After the formalities of the ceremony, while talking with school administrators about the details of the new program, Manny was surprised when Bayani respectfully approached, holding a simple envelope. With the teacher's permission, the boy handed the envelope to Manny, explaining in a low voice that it contained something he would like him to see. Inside, Manny found a school essay that had won first prize in a regional competition titled "Steps to the Future." It didn't mention specific names, but narrated how an act of kindness had changed the trajectory of the author's life, not just for the material benefits, but for the message of dignity and possibility it conveyed. Attached to the essay was a photograph. Bayani, wearing his complete school uniform, standing next to a younger boy from another school, to whom he himself had given a pair of shoes bought with money saved from small jobs he did on weekends. The image perfectly captured the moment when the chain of kindness extended, creating a new link in the chain of positive impact that Manny had initiated. Without grand words or dramatic gestures, Bayani had understood the most important lesson, that receiving help carries the implicit responsibility to help others when possible. Professor Pacquiao, noticing the moment, discreetly shared with Manny how Bayani's example had inspired other students. He specifically mentioned Isagani Dimasalang, a shy boy who previously had learning difficulties, but who was now excelling academically thanks to the voluntary tutoring Bayani offered during breaks. This small community of mutual support had formed organically, with Bayani as a silent catalyst, demonstrating that the impact of a single act of kindness could multiply in unpredictable and wonderful ways. With genuine emotion that he had difficulty containing, Manny thanked Bayani for the precious gift he had just received, not the essay paper or the photograph itself, but the confirmation that his gesture had generated waves that would continue far beyond the initial impact. In a society where poverty often perpetuated cycles of despair and resignation, seeing this example of how generosity could inspire more generosity represented the true victory, more significant than any world boxing title he had won in the rings. Before leaving, Manny invited Bayani to visit his office in Manila during the next school vacation, offering to show the boy some universities where he could eventually study engineering if he continued his successful academic trajectory. It wasn't an empty promise or a charitable gesture, but a genuine recognition of the potential he saw in the young man and an ongoing investment in his future. The implicit message was clear. The pair of shoes had been just the first step of a much longer journey that both would continue to travel, each in their own way, connected by the shared understanding that our true strength lies not in what we receive, but in what we can give to others. As his car pulled away from the school that afternoon, Manny reflected on how a seemingly casual encounter with a barefoot boy had subtly reshaped his own approach to philanthropy and public service. In a world obsessed with grand solutions and immediate results, the experience with Bayani had reaffirmed his belief in the transformative power of focused and personal actions. As a boxer, he had learned that the most important fights aren't always won with powerful blows, but with strategic steps, persistence, and the ability to remain true to one's values. Now, as a public figure with the power to influence change, he carried that same philosophy. That true impact often begins with a single step, or a single pair of shoes, given at the right moment and with an open heart. In the back seat of the car, Manny looked again at the photograph of Bayani with the boy to whom he had given shoes. This was the true legacy he wished to build, not just through large public initiatives or comprehensive policies, but through these small circles of kindness that expanded silently, transforming lives one by one. He thought about how Isagani Dimasalang, the shy boy mentioned by Professor Pacquiao, had found inspiration in Bayani, and how that chain would continue to extend to others they would touch throughout their lives. Before putting away the photograph, Manny noticed something he hadn't initially perceived. In the corner of the image, partially visible, was a small handmade poster on the school wall. Although he couldn't read the complete text, he recognized the word Bayani in large letters, which in Filipino meant hero. He smiled at realizing the significant coincidence. The boy's name carried within it the destiny he was beginning to fulfill, not through great deeds publicly celebrated, but through small acts of everyday heroism that silently changed the world around him, exactly as true heroes have always done. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to our channel.